أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, the days of Muharram and the Ayyam of Aza are upon us, and for the Shi'i community, the days of Muharram, the nights of Muharram, especially the first 10 days and first 10 nights of Muharram, are a very significant phenomenon that people observe in the Shia community across the world. I have done a series and a lecture on the history of Aza, and this is published with the Mizan Institute. I have done it twice. It's not on Iqra Online, but it is available on the Mizan Institute, especially the updated version that I did, which was over 2 parts, where I go through the entire history of the culture of Aza and how it developed, and the different maqatil literature that was written, and so on. But still, there is so much more to say and so much more to explain, especially discussions about the last century. So, as you all know, the world moved quite slowly for much of history. But in the last century, just over a century, 150 years, the world began to move extremely fast because of the technological developments and the discoveries and so on. So the world moves really fast and things change very quick. So everything was affected because of this, everything in the world. And the Azadari culture was also affected by this. And the things and the changes and the developments that happened in this phenomenon, which was a very simple practice in the Shia community for most of centuries, much of the time, became an extremely complex and very creative phenomenon that is there, and we all participate in it. In this video, I want to discuss a little bit of the social history of the last century, because when we think about what we participate in the first 10 nights or for 2 months, we realize that okay, we visit a masjid, we visit a center, and we go to this place, and there is usually some sort of an introductory recitation, whether it's Quran or Dua, or in the South Asian centers, for example, a Marsiya or Salam. And then there is a lecture followed by the Noha or the Latmiya. Now, this specific format, this specific structure, right? Anybody who looks into even basic history of Aza, they will know that this is not how it was done for most of history. So where did this format come from, and why did it come, and who came up with it, and what were the implications of it, and what does that mean for us today, right? Because if this was this format was if this format emerged in a certain context, then that means we are not necessarily tied down to this, right? We can change it up, and we can think of our own context and our own lived realities and make changes to it, basically. So in today's video, it will either be 1 video or maybe 2 videos if if I see, I'll see how much more is left to cover. In this video, I want to go and skim over a very fascinating book, and this book is 5 volumes, and it is written by a sociologist from Iran by the name of Dr. Mohsen Hesam Mazaheri. Now, Mohsen Hesam Mazaheri is a sociologist from Iran, and over the last many years, his main focus has been analyzing the sociology of Shi'i rituals and Iranian rituals. And he goes through the history of them, and he analyzes them, and he explains them, and he explains the sociological implications of them in Iranian society. But what many of us may not know is that much of what happens in the Shi'i world does initially originate in the Iranian context, and things kind of spread out from there, right? So the type of aza, the formats, what we are commemorating, the style, these all initially emerge in a context where there is a history and a heritage and a story and a culture, and then it kind of spreads out to places where the culture might be a little bit weaker and we kind of adopt it, and then of course adjustments are made and so on. South Asia obviously had its own unique culture. It was heavily influenced by Persia as well, Iranian culture, but obviously they changed it up for their own way, and then so did other, ethnicities and regions as well. But the crux of my point is that it actually all emerges from Iran, from Persia. So he wrote this 5-volume book, and actually this is not a very analytical book. What he does in this book, this 5-volume, he analyzes the data and he collects the data for all of the majalis that were happening from 1928, if I double check, 1926 till 2015. And what he does, and so from 1926 to 2015, all the advertising of the majalis that were published in the newspaper called Ittila'at. Okay, it's a very famous newspaper in Iran, pre-revolution, even after revolution, the newspaper is there, because that was the main way to advertise the majalis. So he goes through the archives from the 1920s until 2015, and he separates his books based off of decades. So, for example, the first volume is 1920s till 1950s. And when I say he's going through every single ad, like I literally mean he goes through every single ad, right? Like he has literally scans of every single ad that was published in this newspaper. And then also he breaks them down, he then transcribes them, so there's actual, if you cannot read the ad, then you can read the transcripted text of it. And he gives a very, I guess, basic categorization of it, right? So it's important to kind of see what was happening, because for me this was quite eye-opening, right? Because what we're gonna realize is that by the end of the Qajars, so Qajar was the dynasty, empire before the Shah Pahlavi dynasty. The Qajar were really big on the Azadari as well, right? So just like the Safavids were, the Qajar also made it very complex, and they made these very big, what they call taqiyeh. Taqiyeh were these very big, almost like theaters, where theatrical theaters almost, where people would do azadari and theatrical plays and ta'ziyeh, what they call passion plays, and hundreds and thousands of people would come visit, and it was a royal sort of thing. So in Iran, every government, whether it was the Safavids or the Qajars or the Pahlavis or today, the Islamic Revolution, they have all used Azadari and Muharram for themselves as well. So state-sponsored majalis and state-sponsored sessions and so on. So the Qajar were really big on it, and the Qajar began to create these really big programs. So for example, Sham-e Ghariba was sort of created, this program was created by the Qajars as part of their evening program. And this program would happen in the one of these taqiyas. Okay, so before the Qajar, there's no such thing as Sham-e Ghariba. Okay, so they came up with this idea that we will come in the evening after the day majlis, and we will do a evening aza as well. Now, in the Qajar era, what you realize is that they would use what they call the wa'iz. If you go to one of the videos on the members, which is called Theology for Educators, I break down this phenomenon of the different segments of society. And I say there were ulama, the mujtahideen, then there were these sort of preachers, and then you had like the storytellers. And then I talk about how the storytellers were disappearing, and the preachers were kind of taking on this role. There were these people who were just preachers, storytellers and preachers, and they would be playing the role of the speaker basically in these gatherings. And in fact, what you see even in the old pictures is that the wa'id, the preacher, the storyteller, the one with the good voice, they are the ones sitting on the minbar, while the ulama with their turbans, they are the ones sitting on the ground on near the minbar. Right? So the ulama would come and listen to these wa'az as well. Wa'az is plural for wa'id. All of this is going to change in the next few decades. Okay, all of this is going to change in the next few decades. Okay, but I'm trying to show you. Okay, this has started to happen. This was happening in the Qajar times, right? So the Qajars, they are finished, by the 1920s, and Raza Shah comes into power by 1925. Okay, the first Shah, the father. And what's important is that in the 1920s. So what this book says, he will go through the ads. So actually, let me give you an overall summary of this book. What the book will do. The book concludes that you can look at these majalis from very different angles. So I'm gonna go through all of them. So I can give you an idea. He says, how can we classify these majalis? He says, number one is you can look at the majalis in terms of who is organizing it. So he says there are different types of majalis depending on who is organizing it. So for example, he says one type is the majalis that was organized by the monarchy, or today the supreme leader, for example, the Daftar of Rahbar, Daftar al-Rahbari, okay, or Bayt al-Rahbari. But before Bayt al-Rahbari, it was the monarchy. So some type of majalis are those that were organized and held by the sort of the political government, basically, of that time. So he says this is not new in Iran. Safawids would do it, the Qajars would do it, right? The Pahlavis did it, and today is also done. And in the Qajar time, the most famous kind of place where this would happen was a place called Takiye-Dawlat. So this was demolished later on. It doesn't exist anymore, but there are pictures of it. Okay, but this Takiye-Dawlat was very famous, and the Qajar would used to do it over there. The monarchy, the Raza Shah and the Shah, they would do it. For example, two places, but one of the main places was Kage Gulistan, the Gulistan Palace, that was also struck in the war recently. So that was a big place where they would hold a sort of annual majlis or something like that. Okay, we have some images or even some of the archives of some of these places, some of these majalis. So that was one. A second type would be gatherings by government organizations. So organizations which are like the Ministry of, I don't know, Education, or this ministry or that government agency or this state affiliated institute, they would be organizing majalis. Number three, private and non-profit organizations, not government non-governmental organizations, right? So it could be private organizations, NGOs or charities and this kind of stuff. So every organization would sort of organize their thing, majalis. Type 4 would be the military gathering. In some seasons, some eras, some phases, you see that the army would organize a majlis. Okay, and independently. They would organize majalis for the people and so on. And remember, this is all, like, he has proof for it based on the ads. So these were the ads that would be published, and they would be published in this Ittila'at newspaper. Then some majalis would be organized by guilds and occupational groups. So this is primarily the merchants of the bazaar. Okay, so even today, even today, a lot of this stuff still exists. Sometimes we say this is Fulan Majlis is, by this big businessman. This one businessman, he organizes this big Majlis that happens in our city. So some of them were organized by these merchants. Okay, or trading organizations or certain businesses, for example, they would do this. But mostly it was happening from the merchants of the Bazaar of Tehran. Okay. Then he has ads of majalis which are organized by migrant communities. So in Iran, you have, I don't know, the Azerbaijani community, or I don't know, Fala Arab, the Arab Association of, here we have it, the Khuzestani Arabs Association of Central Tehran. They would organize their thing. The Azerbaijani Association of Tehran residents. So other ethnic groups that would be living in Tehran for whatever business work, them organizing their own majlis, right? So this would happen in as well. Then you have the local neighborhood majalis. So some majalis would happen based on their local neighborhood, and some of these neighborhoods were so big or so sort of famous that you would even end up having rivalry between some of these neighborhoods, right? So almost like east and the west of a city. The east is known for this and the west is known for that. So this was quite known. Number 8 is the gathering by the hayat. Hayat is the most common form of non-government organization of a majalis. And this started from the Qajars. The Qajars came up with this idea of a hayat. What's a hayat? Hayat is like, in Urdu, you can say like an anjuman, okay, or a sangat, for example, or a center, like all of the majalis we have today in most of our centers. These are kind of like a hayat. Now in the Qajar time, the hayat was quite simple. They would have the aza, and this is where the whole qama and the zanjid and the organized matam and all of this stuff would happen in the hayat. Until today, it's like that. Okay, so it was popularized by the Qajars, and then it continued to exist. Then you have majalis that would be organized by certain institutions and religious cultural organizations. So the most famous example of this is what we call the Husseiniye Irshad. Husseiniye Irshad was a really famous what's it called, like a center, okay, and it was built in the 1960s, late 1960s, and it was a place where a lot of intellectuals, scholars, and also like non-mu'ammimin, people in their suits and stuff, they would come and they would lecture here. So one of the most famous lecturers over here is actually Shaykh Mutahari. Shaykh Mutahari would lecture here, and many others, many other big names would lecture over here. In fact, many of the books of Shaykh Mutahari that we have are from his lectures that he would give in Muharram in Husseiniye Irshad. So this was a really famous, basically, place. It's still there. And Husseini Irshad was kind of known to be modern. Like the people would come sit on chairs, which was not a thing. And that time, many ulama were like, "What is this? A majlis means to sit down on the floor, on the ground. Why do we have chairs over here?" So now, when you go to some of these centers, let's say Iranian centers or Afghani centers, you see, for the South Asians, it's still ajib, it's still weird. How can you listen to a majlis on a chair? But when you go to some of these centers, you see it there. So this is actually from that time. Otherwise, yeah, most majalis you sit on the floor. But in Husseini Irshad, they kind of popularized this, and this place was a place where not everybody would go. The cream of the crop of society would go to this place, right? The intellectuals, the university students, and that's why the books of Shaykh Mutahari that are published, I remember one of the books of Shaykh Mutahari is called Theory of Education, Epistemology. So when I was reading this, I remember I would read this in my first term of the Hawza. And at the end of the book, actually, so it finishes around chapter 6, chapter 7, the book ends. And it says that Shaykh Mutahari was not able to finish his lectures because the Shah had banned him basically after the 7th night or 6th night because of so much crowd that was coming and the impact he was happening. So he canceled his lecture, then he was not allowed to continue. So when I read that, and I was like, wait, what? This was Muharram lectures? Like these were Theory of Education, the book that we're studying, were Muharram lectures. So that was very mind-blowing for me. I was like, what kind of a audience is this that's listening to epistemology lectures in Muharram? That was very eye-opening for me. That had a lot of impact on me, by the way. And the way sort of kind of topics I lecture about, right? I'm like, hey, let's raise the bar high on of the audience. People are not dumb; they can grasp things. But that book was had a sort of eye-opening impact on me. So that's that. And then another type of gathering are gatherings that were done by schools and other educational centers. So either the Hawzat would organize a majlis, or a school would organize a majlis, or a university. And the last type of gathering would be the ones that would be organized by the political parties. So different political parties, they would want to organize their majalis. So 11 different types of gatherings, depending on the organization, who's organizing it. So 11 different categories of people and groups existed in the century who were responsible for organizing majalis. Many of them still exist today. Perhaps we have more now. Then he says, okay, you can also look at the majalis from another angle, which is where were they taking place? So over here he says there are about four places where these majalis will take place. Number one is the masajid. So okay, one of the most common places is the masjid. That's where a lot of these ads that you see, it says, in this masjid or that masjid, the majlis is taking place. Second would be the shrines, or these imamzad, like shrines of imamzades, these big shrines, haram, for example, and they would be organized over there. Number three would be the Husainiyas or the Taqiyya, as I said, right? These are kind of like your Imam Bargas, as we say in Urdu, right? Your Imam Barga, your centers. Once again, these were specifically just built for Azadari. There was like no other purpose for them. Another place would be the Waqf places. So these big, places, halls, building that will be endowed by someone. So someone would do Waqf. This place is just for a majlis. So sometimes you would have those type of places. And of course, you also have another place, which is the palace. Palace is the palace of the kings, the monarchy. So you would also have majalis over there. A third way he says you can analyze the majalis is based on the individual who is kind of the center of the attention. So he says, well, you have some majalis which are famous because of the presence of the religious scholars that are there. Okay, so Fulan Majlis, doesn't matter who is organizing it, doesn't matter where it's being organized, Fulan scholar is reading over there, right? So today, mashallah, we have many speakers, very famous speakers, right? So it doesn't matter, where Sheikh Fulan, a very famous Sheikh, let's say, or very famous Sayyid, where they're reading. If they're reading in England or Canada or Australia or America in Fulan Center, doesn't matter if that center the rest of the year is nobody goes there. People are gonna go there because that scholar is over there. Okay, so you have gatherings that are famous because of that, and this will begin to happen, especially after the 1940s, 1950s. This will pick up after that. So before 1940s, 1950s, you don't see the ulama's presence too much as the main lecturer, and you'll see it was all because of political reasons. It was all a response to the monarchy and the issues. Inshallah, I'm gonna quote you some of the titles of the type of lectures that they would give. The second type would be gatherings, which is a gathering of political figures. So sometimes you had gatherings where government officials and dignitaries and military leaders, for example, they would be invited. So this could mostly happen in the Shah's, for example, palace, or government majalis, for example, organized by the government institutions. They would invite these big individuals, for example, and their presence would serve as a source of form of legitimacy for the majlis. Okay, so that's that. Then you had gatherings of what they call lutis and these strong men, these pahlavans. Okay, what is this? I mean, we don't see this over here, but actually, if you go to Iran, you can still see this in some places. like in Yazd, in Tehran. Like you can find this. Uh, so in their culture, what it is basically, when you bring a procession out or you do a majlis, there is this whole idea of you've seen the big alams in Iran. They're quite big. They're not like the South Asian, alam that we hold. They do something called alam gardani. So they move it around, and so on. So, these kind of things, you need strong men to do that, right? So there are these pahlavans and these strong men who are known to be present at this gathering because they will be doing this activity. And it will be a way for them to kind of show their masculinity, their bravery, their courage. Anyways, so he's saying some of these ceremonies were known because of this. Then you have women gatherings, so women majalis. Now, you can trace the existence of women majalis to the Qajar era. But in the books, you don't find a lot of ads for them until a little bit later on. Okay, so I think in one of the decades, he says, the first ad comes up in the Ittilaat newspaper, but you don't really see too many ads for it. But it is there. So some majalis are just women majalis. Then you had majalis that were done by the Sufi dervishes. So in these khanqahs, these Sufi lodges, they would also do these majalis. Okay, they would hold their majalis because of so remember, it's about who's present. The Sufis are present over here, and they would do it in their own way. Then, as especially after the Iran-Iraq war, you have majalis that are done where the families of the shohada are there. So the shohada families, majalis organized where they are present. Okay, you have gatherings which are done for where the Janbazan are present. Janbazan are the veterans of war. So either they are disabled or injured or whatever, amputated arms and legs. These are called veterans, Janbazan. Many majalis, so I've seen some of these even right now. They happen in Iran today. So majalis for the Janbazan of this war or that war or this battle that happened and so on. Okay, so that is the sort of three divisions he does. He says you can look at the majlis based off of who is organizing it, where it's being organized, and who are the individuals that are present in that majlis. So a lot of it is still true today, right? Even today, sometimes we go to a majlis because of where it's taking place. So for example, there's a big center in your city, right? It's the main local center. That's the place you go. You won't care who they've invited. You're going to go there. Okay, they can invite the most intellectual speaker or the most sort of, as people would say, not very entertaining, very boring, speaker. But you're still going to go there because that's the place you're affiliated with. That's the place you go. Second is, once again, you won't care where it's being organized or who is coming there, but who is organizing it. Fala organization is organizing it, or Fala business is organizing it, or Fala individual is organizing it. I'm going to be there. And third is, I don't care where it's being organized and I don't care who is organizing it, but who is the center of attention? Is it the Janbazan? Is it the Shohada families? Is it the ulama? Is it the political individuals? I'm going to go based off of that. So I'm saying even today it's like this. Even in our communities, sometimes you will go somewhere because your favorite speaker is coming. Sometimes you're going to go somewhere, even if your favorite speaker is speaking somewhere in the same city, but let's say a little bit far, you're going to go to your mosque because that's where you go. Okay? And some people are kind of, they don't care who's coming, but they're like, what, this organization, I love this organization. So I just want to be with them. Okay, so you'll go wherever a certain organization is organizing it, or where certain individuals are present. Okay, so if a group of Hausa scholars organize a majlis in your city, you're gonna go there because the Hausa scholars are organizing it. Wow, so if they're organizing it, it must be something very special. Or you're gonna go somewhere and say, okay, you know what? Wow, these business people are gonna be present there, right? Or these political guys are gonna be present there. So I'm going to go over there. So, okay. So that's kind of what it is. Then he talks about, how were these majalis advertised? So he says, there's a lot of different types of advertising. So one were the printed wall posters. Okay, so just printed out from the press and then put on the walls. These were the earliest form of advertising. Then you had handwritten small notes. Okay, actually I should show you some of them so you get an idea. Right, so these are like the wall notes. Majalis Sogwari, right? These are like wall notes. Some of them are like just handwritten notes. I think some of them look like, handwritten notes, and so on. Then you have some which are like invitation letters. Okay, so for example, one of them over here is like an invitation letter that is being given, by Fulan organization or Fulan individual, Fulan organization, whatever. Right, look at this. E'lamiye Darbar Shahanshahi. So the ad for the Majlis in the Darbar of the Shahanshah, the palace of the king. Right, so that's kind of that. Then he says you had also printed ads. Right, so advertising that is kind of printed. It could be in newspapers and stuff. Let me show you this really interesting one. Look at this one. Okay, so this is in a newspaper, this one right here. Okay, now what it says is, the basically Sogwari means, you can't see, it's very tiny. Sogwari means morning. So morning ceremony, this is the ad for it, this is the place. Ya Aba Abdullah Hussein. Address, what is it done by? It's done by some hayat, something, it's very small, even I cannot read it. Actually there's a couple of ads. Now look at the ads on the side. One ad is about kindergarten school. One ad is about a class that is happening on sociology by some scholar, some professor. And then one ad is about language, like learning English, German, and French. Okay, so an ad for an learning language institute. And then one ad is for a radio, because radios are new. So they're giving and there's a girl sitting there, like all her arms exposed, and she's wearing like a dress skirt. And then there's a class for dancing and ballet. Okay, so this side is all Azadari ads, like Majalis ads. Remember, this is the Shah's time. These are all ads. And then over here there's an ad for dance and ballet classes for girls. Okay, Ali Tareen class raqs wa ballet. Right, so he's saying these are the type of ads that were published as well. Then you have flyers, and then as you he says from the Pahlavi time onwards, you have these handwritten cloth banners. You still see them today. Okay, then he says there are these parchams, these cloth standards that you see. You see those today as well. Then sometimes you see these metal signboards. So you have this permanent metal signboards, and then they just keep changing the text on it. These are their posters. And then he says, look, now it's like text messages. Right, from the late 1990s, people start getting text messages. Then you have radio, television, printed banners, billboards, digital advertising. So now, like, really, it's pretty much, most of us go through digital advertising. Right, so that's that. Another thing I want to explain, which I forgot to mention, is that the lecture. So the main thing I was going to say is that the lecture format that we are accustomed to today. So as I said, it was something like it was there from the Qajar time, but it was really, really popularized under Raza Shah, because Raza Shah came up with an organization called Sazman Parvaresh Afkar Umumi, the the organization for cultivating public opinion. right? And he, believe it or not, he copied this from Nazi Germany. Okay, he copied this model from Nazi Germany, where he said, "I will create an organization to whose job will be, and it'll be kind of linked with the Ministry of Education and other, arts and I don't know, women's association and education ministry and so on. Like there was multiple sort of these mini organizations that would be under it and so on." And the idea was that, hey, Nazi Germany was able to really establish a very strong identity for the Germans, for the Nazis, basically, for their ideology. So he took that model and he wanted to do the same thing for Iran and Iranians. Now, look at some of the explanations that were given. Dr. Isa Sadiq, in his inaugural speech at the Organization for the Cultivation of Public Opinion, when it was opened up, look what he says. He says, "The will of His Imperial Majesty, Raza Shah, has compelled the people to accomplish in 18 years what Europe achieved between the 16th and the 20th centuries over a period of 400 years. So he's basically saying, look, Raza Shah is amazing, right? And look, all of his modernity and all of his developments and the ideas he's brought in, we can accomplish what the Europeans did in 400 years, we can do it in 18 years. And that was the only goal of this organization. So they started to format the Majalis as in this format, and they started to push it. Because it was like, hey, it's all about intellectual sort of development and Roshan Fikr and becoming enlightened and so on. Right? Now, look at this. The idea was to create a national conscience. It's all about nationalism, by the way. Strong national will, intellectual unity throughout society. So one of the biggest things that was happening is the majority of Iranians were not understanding the reforms Reza Shah is bringing. They were against it. So one of the goals was that improve the public understanding of the reforms through directed education and thought. And strengthen the nation's collective spirit. These were the goals. How will they do it? There were different commissions, different sort of subcommittees. One of them was literally called the Lecture Commission. Okay, their job was to promote lectures, okay, through transmission of knowledge. Then you had the Radio Commission, the Textbook Compilation Commission, the Theatrical Arts Commission, the Music Commission, and the Press Commission. Right? So that was the goal of this organization. Now, and then one of their, they had a training institute as well. And in the training institute, they have these courses. I'm looking at some of the names over here. Now, the thing is, by 1941, this organization, 1941 is also when Raza Shah escaped Iran. It died out. So it ran for about, few years, right? 1938 to 1941, 3-4 years. They did all they kind of started all this phenomenon, but 1941 it died out. But this lecture format, the culture stayed. Okay, the culture stayed. And that's how it started. The idea was to use and insert lecturers in these majalis and use it for a certain purpose. Now, since so here's the thing. In these ads, in the early decades, from the 1920s and 1930s, there's no information about the topics of these majalis. Okay, we do, like, names start to pop up in the ads. He has a whole list of all the names of the different scholars. He writes, was this a religious scholar? Was it a university professor? Was it a political person? Were they mu'ammam? Were they not mu'ammam? Names start to pop up, but it's really, in the late 1940s, 1950s. I should mention that Raza Pahlavi also banned Azadari from 1935 to 1941. So all these public gatherings were not happening. So there's no ads actually from 1935 to 1941. There's zero ads. There's no ads. From 1941, it picks up again. Now, in 1941 onwards, when it picks up, you start seeing topics of the Majalis. Now remember, Raza Pahlavi is in power. The Shah's son is in power. And this is the first time, it says, in the 1940s, in the decade of the 1940s, it is the first time the mawzu of the Sukhanrani is mentioned. The topic of the speech is mentioned. And he says in the 40s, you find 15 places 15 ads where the topic is mentioned. Let me read some of these ads. Look at this. By the way, he says you can tell from the topics that are chosen what the general socio-cultural, political mindset of the people was at that time, in that decade. There was instability in the country, and it was a new government. Raza Shah had gone, Raza Pahlavi had come, and there were economic and political crises that were happening, and there was a little bit of freedom for everyone to sort of speak and write, including atheists and communists and all of that stuff. Okay, one of this was also that there was a lot of discussion on critiquing superstitions and critiquing irrational practices and rituals and so on. So you see this in these topics. So let me read some of the topics for you. This is from 1942 actually. Jihad in Islam. Okay, Haqa'iq of Islam, the reality of Islam, the personality of Imam Hussein, freedom of women in Islam. So look, 1940s, there's a lot of stuff happening in the world of women in Islam by that time, by that era. So that's a discussion in a Muharram lecture. Hurriyat wa azadi zanan dar Islam. Tawheed and the secrets in the Quran, and the secrets of the Quran. The events of today and the philosophy of the Shahadat of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and his sacrifice, and how it can be used to establish adalat, justice, and freedom. Reality of Islam and sacrifice of Imam Hussein. The value of sacrifice and the jihad of Imam Hussein. The secret of the Shahadat of Imam Hussein and his sacrifice of the Ahlul Bayt and so on in the way of protecting Islam. Look at this. The reality of Islam from natural sciences, from sociology, from economic theories, and taqneen is basically civil code, like contemporary politics basically. The reality is trying to prove the reality of Islam from sciences, modern sciences. Khurafat, superstitions in the contemporary era. The lessons of the Shahadat of Imam Hussein, the philosophy of Shahadat of Ahlul Bayt, basically all the 5 Ahlul Bayt, philosophy of Shahadat, reality of Iman, the revolution of Imam Hussein. This is probably one of the earliest mentions of revolution of Imam Hussein, Nahzat Muqaddas Husseini. So this is in the 1940s. And by the way, so once again, he breaks it down like that. He brings the ads, right? He brings the ads. I can't go through every single one of them. There's too many. And in that it says which scholar or which speaker was speaking about this topic and so on. So then, some of these are so interesting. Then in the 1950s, I want to show you the topics, how they change. So in the 1950s, he says in the 1950s, there are 1,200 ads of the Majalis in this newspaper Ittila'at, which is a 40% increase from the previous decade. Okay? Which is a 40% increase from the 1940s. Okay, so then he says, let's look at some of these. Where is this Majalis happening? So he has a table, like where do all the ads show, like where it's happening. So 4 Majalis in this decade happened in the Darbar of the Shahanshah. So this could be Kage Gulistan Palace, or another one of the other famous masjids that the Shah would have his thing in. 7 majalis in this decade happen are organized by the political government, by government organizations. 5 by non-government organizations. Then these guilds I was talking about, these business merchants and so on, 139 were organized by them. 107 majalis in this entire decade. Sorry, I want to make it clear. It's not that 107 majalis happened. 107 ads were published in this Ittila'at newspaper, and all of this is basically Tehran, basically. Right? It's not talking about the whole country, but Tehran was obviously the main, cultural and trendsetter. 108 majalis by these, businessmen and these businesses. Then, other organizations and so on. Where were they happening? In the masajid, in the Husayniyas, in the, in places that are endowed. Look at this. Majalis where the religious people and the scholars are the central focus. 171. Look at the increase in this. Okay, look at the increase. Remember, the previous decade, there was a ban. There was nothing happening. 1950s is basically when this reaction happened. And the ulama got involved as a proper structural change. Right? So that's quite interesting. So look, 1950s is when this happened. Now, let me show you some of the names, names of people. Muhammad Taqi Falsafi gave 64 ads about his majalis in the Ittila'at newspaper in the 1950s. Muhammad Taqi Falsafi is was a very famous speaker, scholar. Hussein Wahid Khurasani. This is Ayatollah Wahid Khurasani, 1950s. There are 65 ads for his majalis in the Ittila'at newspaper. This is Ayatollah Wahid Khurasani. Okay, he was just a speaker at that time. And it says, he's mu'ammam, he's a man, mard, because it says, is it a man speaking or is it a woman speaking? It's a mard. And it breaks it down. In 1951, there are 7 ads. 1952, there are 3 ads for his majlis. And the ads are here. It's in the book. You can read the ads. You can find the location and all of that. Then Muhammad Taqi Falsafi, Murtaza Ansari Qumi, Hussein Ali Rashid, Sayyid Muhammad Musavi, Murtaza Mutahari gave 13. So look, Sayyid Mutahari has 13 majalis advertised in this entire decade. Agha Wahid Khurasani had 65. So look how famous he was. Look how popular he was as a speaker. Sayyid Agha Taliqani, Ayatollah Taliqani. Remember, they're not Ayatollahs yet. They're just very young speakers at that time. Who else? Other names that you might be familiar with. Muhammad Yazdi. These are all religious people. Then you have, so there's a lot of names over here. This just keeps going on. There's too many names. Let's see some of the names of the Muhammad Taqi Shariati. This is not Ali Shariati. This is somebody else. But one lecture. But it says he was a political figure, basically. Okay, let's look at the topics now. Look how the topics are going to change. When the ulama got involved, the topics are going to change. Not change that much, but you'll see. Sacrifice of Imam Hussein and the sort of model for being a free man a model for the free men of this world. Philosophy of Imam Hussein, the Irfani secrets and Irfani and spiritual secrets of the Qiyam of Imam Hussein, economy in Islam, economics in Islam, the reality of the Husseini reality and the secrets of and the spiritual secrets of this divine Qiyam, the greatness of the revolution of Imam Hussein, the sacred revolution of Imam Hussein, the personality of Imam Hussein, and the importance of his revolution from the perspective of politics and akhlaq. Philosophy of Shahadat, the secrets of the Qiyam of Imam Hussein from the perspective of science and mysticism. Okay, science. The wilayat of the Prophet and Amir al-Mu'mineen, the spiritual dimensions of the event of Karbala and our responsibilities today, discussion on Khilafat and Imamat, historical discussions on the revolution of Imam Hussein, the fazail of the family of the Holy Prophet and the philosophy of the Shahadat, the Dawran, the era of the Khilafat of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. How the Prophet did da'wat in his time, the methods of preaching, the historical assumptions and foundations for the mazhab of Tashayyu and its future, the wilayat of Imam Raza alayhi salam, the method of Imam Hussein, and comparing that with the rest of the Imams. What an interesting topic. Happening in 1339 is about almost 1960, right? 1960, they're already now discussing, comparing and contrasting Imam Hussein's revolution with the rest of the revolutions. This was just volume 1. Okay, now if I get time, inshallah, I'll make another video where I just want to go through the topic titles, because the topic titles are very interesting and they're going to keep increasing. The ads will keep increasing, obviously, right? So volume 2 is right here, right? This is from the, basically it will be, which decade? This would be 1960s, basically. Yeah, 1960s. Okay, so this is 1960s. You can see the picture changes. The picture changes. Compare that with the first picture, right? It's a little bit different. Volume 3 is 1970s. Look at the Majalis. Look how it's a person with a suit, right? 1970s. Then you have 1980s and the 1990s. So this is now after revolution, right? And then you have obviously the contemporary era. Look at the picture of that, right? So I'll probably make a second video where I just go through the topic titles. You'll start seeing other names, Makarim Shirazi and Ali Khamenei and all the names. They were all speakers. And remember, they were all speaking as a rebuttal to the politics of that time, which was the Shah. That's what was happening. And the Shah was doing his own majalis in his palace with his lectures, and he would bring scholars as well, right? He would bring scholars as well, and then they would sort of, justify and give credibility to the Shah. But the topic titles are very interesting, right? So anyways, I just wanted to kind of, show this book, highlight this book for all of you, and kind of give you a glimpse into, the early formation of this current lecture format that we have. And the fact that, it was popularized by Raza Shah's organization, Sazman Parvarish Afkar, as almost like a propaganda tool, basically, to bring national unity, because they realized, this is the way to do it. So that means that it is a powerful tool. But it also means it's highly contextual. And it can be used in any way, and it can be molded, and it can be made contemporary. It can be changed. It can be altered. It can be modified, because we're not bound to something that Reza Shah came up with, and he was inspired by Nazi Germany, right? So it's quite fascinating to kind of see the history of that. But anyways, my point being here is that I want us to understand that we don't have to be so rigid with the style of the way we do things, right? Because if you watch the history of Azah videos, it's very clear. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, when he does the initial Azadari, Imam Bakr alayhi salam, this is not how it was happening. It was a very simple gathering, mostly in the house. They would do poetry. Muharram was the 10 days especially, was you had to be in a state of huzn, in a state of sorrow, right? That's what was the point of it. That's the ultimate point of it, actually, being in a state of sorrow, right? So anyway, so rest is history, basically, as they say. And today, as you can see, the aza, especially once again in Iran, the way it's done, how they have kind of you know they bring out their lived realities in the aza, which most other cultures don't do that. Indian Pakistanis don't do that. The Iraqis don't do that. Lebanese maybe, right? But really, even they're influenced by Iran. Their Azadari culture was influenced by Iran in the 1930s as well. The merchants of Tehran will go to Lebanon and so on. So really, it's actually, you have to study Iranian culture, Iranian society, to understand what's happening really in the Shia world and how this culture kind of disseminates itself. Anyways, just thought I would share these interesting pieces of information. If I get a chance, inshallah, I'll go through the other books as well, just through the lecture notes, lecture topics, because they are interesting. But inshallah, maybe, if I get time in the next 10 days, I don't know. But if not now, maybe later on, inshallah, I'll make something. Until then, I'll see you guys later. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.